Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the SKNIS Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards. Welcome to InFocus, a weekly program where we zoom in on what's happening within and throughout the government, your government. World Consumer Rights Day is celebrated every year on March 15. The observation aims to raise global awareness of consumer rights, protection, and empowerment. Do you know your rights? Do you even care? Joining us today are officials from the Department of Consumer Affairs who insist that every consumer should know his or her rights. Director of Consumer Affairs, Paul Quealy, is with us, and also the department's communication officer, Tricia Rollins. They will share insight and valuable information on the department and its importance. Have a question for our guests? Of course, we encourage you to post it in the comment section on Facebook or on YouTube as we delve into your government's business. Welcome, and before we introduce our guests once again, allow me to apologize for the President of the St. Kitts and Nevis Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Mr. Michael Davis, who was supposed to be joining us. He is currently unavailable. But instead, as we mentioned, we have Mr. Quealy and Ms. Rollins. Welcome to both of you. It's a pleasure to have you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us.
So, as we speak about World Consumer Rights Day, we mentioned, of course, that today is World Consumer Rights Day. Can you tell us, first of all, what is the role and the importance of the Department of Consumer Affairs, which of course is charged with the protection of consumers?
Well, the function of the department, or the role overall, is for the protection of consumer interests within the Federation. For we are the only advocacy group for consumers within the Federation. There are no consumer groups such as the one located in Antigua. The name slips me at the moment, but we are the only advocacy group within the Federation for Consumer Protection. And we function as a mediator between the businesses and consumers when they have an issue, a need redress.
Allow me to add to what Mr. Quealy says. The functions of the department are multifaceted. We conduct market research, we monitor the prices of items that fall within the government price monitoring program, and we engage in continuous consumer awareness programs to educate the public.
Right. Well, you just touched a bit on in terms of the scope of the department, but can you give us a bit more in terms of in-depth in terms of the activities that are undertaken by the department?
Well, on a bi-weekly basis, officers venture into the field. They collect pricing information on the food basket items. This is needed for us to do our in-house calculations on the price fluctuations over the weeks and months, so that we can get an idea of what's going on with the prices if persons are staying within the markup range that they're supposed to be within, based off of SRNO 41, which is the food basket list. Officers also do inspections to ensure that no expired goods are on the shelves. If they are found, they're removed, and we contact health department and we fax the form to them that is used to remove the items from the shelves, and they would come in after and dispose of these at the landfill. As mentioned earlier, we also deal with complaint resolution. Persons can come into the office, file a complaint with us if they purchase faulty items, and they need to get the situation addressed. We would investigate the claim. Our investigation officers would investigate the claim because all claims might not be factual. So we have to interface with the businesses and see what is actually happening with the case. If it is a situation where the business is actually in breach, the item is faulty, the customer is, they are allowed to have a refund, an exchange, or they could even ask to have the item repaired, but you cannot repair the item on your own. It would have to be a request of the consumer. In addition to that, we also do customer outreach, as mentioned by the communications officer. We are trying to ramp up our efforts in consumer outreach, so persons are aware of their rights as consumers. Persons are under the impression from a lot of the interaction we have with them that the department is primarily based on price control. But in actuality, we are here for much more. We are here for all sort of transaction. Once it is transaction based and there's an issue with the transaction, that's where the Consumer Affairs Department comes into play.
Right, because it's a question that I also had for you in the sense that most persons, when you think of the Department of Consumer Affairs, they normally would think of supermarkets. But what about services as well?
Yes, services are covered under the Consumer Protection Act. Once you're purchasing an item, it could be a good, it could also be a service. You're entitled to quality of service. Even if it is a sale item, a sale is a reduction in price, not a reduction in quality. So you are entitled to an item that is fit for purpose, and if it is not fit for purpose, you have a good claim to come to the Consumer Affairs Department, because you would be eligible to get a refund or exchange for your money.
And could you give us a sense of like what type of services that would apply to?
It applies to even if you're purchasing insurance for your vehicle, it would go down to like terms of a contract. Our Act speaks to contracts. The consumer should not be held to sign a contract where they stand to be worse off. You cannot force a customer to sign a contract where you're putting them in a bad situation unknowing to them. So you have to explain all terms of the contract to them, and if it is a situation where you're actually forcing them to sign a contract that is not beneficial to them, that is grounds for us to step in.
Okay, so let me give you a scenario then. Let's say like you're a car owner, you have a mechanic who's giving you service that is not up to par. Would a scenario like that take place as well? Is that under your purview?
Yes, it can be, but based on how the legislation is currently set up, it would require us to actually go through the Attorney General's chambers, because the Act specifies that there is supposed to be a board and a tribunal in place, and currently those are not in place. So legally, for us to actually pursue those large cases which involve vehicles, it could be a matter relating to your home, we would have to actually get the information related to the case, draft a report, and forward it to the Attorney General's chamber, and then they will take it from there with the legal action. But once the department gets constructed properly in accordance with the legislation, and that is what we're trying to do with the new legislation that is coming, once it gets set up properly, we will be able to handle certain matters in-house right there. Right?
And we certainly will come back and talk a bit more about the legislation later. Ms. Rollins, you are the communications officer, as we mentioned earlier. What does your role entail?
Well, my role is a simple one. Simple in terms of I am the one responsible for writing and distributing content on behalf of the department. So anything that you see out there that has consumer affairs stamp on it, I would have a part to play in that. Right now, consumer education is a big part of what we have going for 2023. So I am the driving force behind these initiatives.
Right. So can you delve a bit more in terms of like what your role, how the consumers would benefit from your post being created, and when was it created?
The post was created, I think, around 2010, to be exact, when we were transforming the department into a more efficient one. At that time, I was not the director, of course, but I was working in the department. So, yeah, I think it was around 2010.
So, Ms. Rollins, how long have you been on board?
I have been on board since last year.
Right.
So I am fairly new to the role, but I am settling in just fine.
Okay, so can you tell us how consumers will benefit now from having the post of the communications officer filled?
Well, like I said, consumer education is important to the department, so consumers will benefit from the information we are now putting out there, because like Mr. Creeley would have mentioned, there are many misconceptions out there about what Consumer Affairs Department does. So putting that information out there, the correct information, will benefit the consumers, allow them to be more informed and make better informed decisions.
So how does the department sensitize the general public?
Well, we are doing radio sessions. We are going into the schools. We launched our Consumer Education for Kids program yesterday, which is geared towards educating children at the primary school level, because we realize that children are targeted by a lot of business places, and children have some sort of influence on their family's spending. So we are starting at the younger age so that they can be sensitized and understand how to use their money, how to budget, what are their needs and wants, what are their rights and responsibilities. So in educating the children, we are hoping the children will go forth and educate their peers and even educate their parents.
So what does that program entail? Do you go into the schools? Do you have sessions outside of school? How does it work?
Well, we just launched the program yesterday, like I said. So we launched it at 3 schools. It was the Sadler's Primary School, the St. Paul's Primary School, and the Dr. William Connor Primary School. What we are doing, we are going in as a department to teach different consumer-related topics alongside the social studies teacher. So we'll be teaching and they'll be assisting, and there will be times when, if they feel more comfortable to teach the subject area, we are there to assist them.
Okay, and Mr. Quealy, you've been the director of the department for how long now?
Since 2013. Yeah.
Okay. And can you share a bit about what your responsibilities are?
Well, my responsibilities are to ensure the proper functioning of the department, to create new ways to reach consumers. Alongside Mrs. Rollins, we work closely together to get the message out about the department, interface in meetings with stakeholders such as customs and the bureau. These are critical stakeholders for us when we have in the bureau, when we have testing of products which may have been brought to the department by consumers. Customs to get information on the food basket items so that we can do proper calculations in-house to ensure persons are staying within the markup ranges.
And when you say the bureau, you're referring to the Bureau of Standards.
Correct.
Right, okay. How would you describe the relationship between the agencies and the Consumer Affairs Department?
We have a very good working relationship. Our government agencies are basically intertwined together, so we have to work together to accomplish the common goal of the government. So we have a good working relationship.
Right. Okay. Can you share a bit, either of you, about the responsibility of the consumer as it relates to consumer affairs?
Well, the responsibility of the consumers would be, when they are shopping, read, research. Don't just buy things because they are on sale. This is your responsibility to know what you are buying, because in the event that you buy a product or you purchase a service and you go home and you no longer want it, a business is not entitled to give you a refund just because you changed your mind. So we want the consumers to know that it is their responsibility to read and research the products or services that they are purchasing. The consumers have the responsibility to be informed, to be educated. The consumers have the responsibility to act with reasonable care and not cause damage to property or harm to other people. So along with their rights, there comes a lot of responsibilities for the consumers. Mr. Quilly, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that's about it there, but I would also add when persons encounter an issue with a merchant, do not try to create confusion in the business place. That is something that persons, I think, they need to hear and understand. Most times when we have a case, the businesses refuse to actually deal with the consumers. So when you have an issue with a product, if you cannot get it addressed amicably, try to come to the Consumer Affairs Department and we will address it for you. So be responsible in that aspect and not create a bigger situation out of something that can be resolved quite easily.
Mr. Quilly, you've been in the post since 2013, as you mentioned, and we're speaking about consumers and their rights and their responsibilities. How would you rate persons in St. Kitts and Nevis, and of course there are residents from overseas that live here, how would you rate them as consumers?
How would I rate them? That's kind of a tough question.
Do you think that they are aware of their responsibilities? Do they actively show that they are able to speak out for themselves and have issues resolved?
Persons who repatriated back home, having lived in the US for quite a while, they might have been accustomed to a certain level of consumer protection over there. In the US, the laws are very different to what we have in the Federation. You can just take an item today, decide you don't want it, and take it back tomorrow, and they will take it back from you, no questions asked. Mm-hmm. But here in St. Kitts, they will get an eye-opener that you cannot just return an item just like that. You can only return an item if it actually has an issue. The merchant is not obligated to take back the item from you just because you don't want it. And that is the big difference between St. Kitts, to some degree, and the US. So when persons come to our office, just recently we had a gentleman in our office, and he was basically trying to rewrite the laws for us about how we should conduct business in St. Kitts. So he wanted business done the same way as it is, he's accustomed to it in the US, but that is not the way how it's conducted here.
And I suppose that will come up again in the discussion that we'll have a bit later on about legislation. So let me ask then, in terms of the fact that when somebody has an issue, you said that they shouldn't try to deal with it alone. They should, if it can't be handled amicably, they should seek assistance from the department. So how can consumers interact with the department?
Well, to interact with the department, you can come into our physical office. We are located in the Nagico building on Bladens. You can call the office, that's 465-2521, extension 3211, that is my extension. You have Mr. Quilly's extension 1550, and you can also contact 2641. Also, we have our Facebook page, that is the St. Kitts Consumer Affairs Department page. We are trying to be more active on the social platforms, so you can check our Facebook page. You can also file your complaint on the Facebook page. You can also go to our ministry's website, which is mitica@gov.kn, and you can click on the Consumer Affairs tab and get the same information that you would find on the Facebook page, other than our daily posts.
And Mitica will be
MITICCA.
Right. Okay. And in terms of the Facebook, of course, I think it's important for persons to recognize that they should send a private message. Don't just go and post something where everybody can see it.
Yes, you can send us a private message and we'll respond.
Okay. So today is the World Consumer Rights Day, as we mentioned. It's March 15th. Can you speak to her about the significance of World Consumer Rights Day?
Well, World Consumer Rights Day is basically a day where the international consumer organizations use to highlight various aspects of where consumer protection is lacking, and to initiate discussions on that to better bring about change in this specific area. This year the theme is empowering consumers through clean energy transitions. And this basically has been brought about from COVID-19, where we saw escalation in gasoline prices, which led to electricity bills increasing worldwide. And it also has to do with carbon emissions from the use of fossil fuels. As you may be aware, fossil fuels contain carbon. Fossil fuels such as coal contain carbon that has been absorbed by plants through photosynthesis. And when we burn these coal and other fossil fuels, they release this carbon back into the atmosphere, which generates heat. It heats up the atmosphere. And it ultimately results in what we are now hearing as climate change. All right? And from this climate change, we get unpredictable weather patterns, stronger hurricanes. And you know, we live in a hurricane area. We had Category 5 hurricanes coming through here not too long ago. So the theme is to draw focus to these sort of things and to bring about discussions on moving away from these sort of fuels and start using clean energy so that we can reduce our carbon emissions and so that we can have our world for a longer period of time.
And I would imagine that would be the message that will be communicated with the various activities that you've been having throughout the week.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. Can you tell us a bit about that? So what are some of the activities the department has been engaged in?
Well, the week of activities, like you said, is centered around the theme for this year. We started the week with a praise and worship service at the Roman Catholic Church on Sunday, and the minister, Dr. Denzel Douglas, would have also given his minister's speech on that Sunday. Then on Monday, we went to various radio stations to continue our drive to educate the public on all consumer-related matters and to speak more on the theme and how it affects the consumers. Tuesday, we went into the schools and we launched our Consumer Education for Kids program. Today, we have our primary school quiz finals. It will be held at the Kuna Conference Center at 5 p.m. We have 5 primary schools vying for the championship. And then tomorrow, we are doing Business Appreciation Day. So we are doing pop-ups to the different business places and awarding them with certificates of appreciation. Those businesses that would have contributed to our week of activities and those businesses that properly address consumers' complaints when we go to them. And then we wind down on Friday. We will have a team building event at the Caribel Batik for the staff of Consumer Affairs.
Right. Okay. And how have the activities gone so far?
They are going great, I must admit. The launch yesterday was a success. We had the minister present, and we also had our PS, Mrs. Jasmine Weeks, present there at all 3 schools. So it was a success. So we are looking forward to this evening. It's a lot of preparations that went into it, so we are hoping this evening runs smoothly.
Right. Okay, well, you just referred to the Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas, who of course is the Minister responsible for Consumer Affairs. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to hear actually from Minister Douglas. InFocus will be right back.
I am delighted to make my first address to you in observance of World Consumer Rights Day 2023. Since it being first introduced in 1983 by Consumers International, World Consumer Rights Day is celebrated annually on March the 15th. This celebration provides a platform for agencies and organizations involved in the promotion and protection of the rights of the consumer, to also highlight the importance of consumer rights, and of course to advocate for changes to policies which are intertwined with consumer transactions. And so as we celebrate World Consumer Rights Day under the theme, empowering consumers through clean energy transitions, it is an opportunity for us as consumers, as business owners, and as government to impart greater emphasis on the need for the protection of our planet from the negative effects of high concentrations of greenhouse gases. In addition, it allows for the promotion of various forms of clean or renewable energy sources and highlighting the cost-saving benefits offered to our consumers. As a government, the world over is struggling to navigate the greatest cost of living crisis in a generation, and as the energy world responds to supply and climate issues, ultimately, it is imperative that long-term sustainability is achieved by the integration of alternative energy sources to the benefit of our consumers. This year's theme for World Consumer Rights Day also brings to the fore pressing issues of food scarcity and high prices of goods and services, which consumers are facing daily as the world struggles to rebound economically and financially from the ravaging effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing Russian-Ukraine war.
And welcome back to InFocus. We continue our discussion with the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs, Paul Creeley, and the Communications Manager for the Department of Consumer Affairs, Tricia Rollins. We just played a clip from the Minister responsible for Consumer Affairs, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, and one of the things he spoke about in his address to open the week was the reintroduction of the CARICOM Consumer Protection Bill. What does this entail?
Well, the Consumer Protection Bill had its first reading in 2021. It was introduced to the Parliament on the 5th of August. And after that, the Department engaged in a wide series of consultation exercises with the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, persons who are involved in the tourism sector, small shops and businesses, and we were to get stakeholder feedback from them to further enhance the document. And what happened is, during that period, certain things transpired and the government changed. So with the government changing, it would have to be reintroduced again for first reading because the life of that Parliament had ended. I don't know if that answers your question fully.
Well, yes, but can you tell us a bit about the scope of the bill then?
Okay, going into the bill, the bill is based off of CARICOM consumer protection legislation that was drafted with the intention of having it adopted across all CARICOM member states. It seeks to give effect to the community's competition policy articulated in Part 2 of Chapter 8 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, specifically Articles 184 and 185. Article 185 provides that the following policy objectives should be addressed. A, the fundamental terms of a contract and the implied obligations of parties to a contract for the supply of goods or services. B, the prohibition of the inclusion of unconscionable terms in contracts for the sale and supply of goods or services to consumers. C, the prohibition of unfair trading practices, particularly such practices relating to misleading or deceptive conduct or fraudulent conduct. D, the prohibition of production and supply of harmful and defective goods, and for the adoption of measures to prevent the supply or sale of such goods, including measures requiring the removal of defective goods from the market. E, the provision of services is in compliance with applicable regulations, standards, codes, and licensing requirements. F, that goods supplied to consumers are labeled in accordance with standards and specifications prescribed by competent authorities. And in relation to this, we see a lot of goods on the market sometimes which do not have English on them. This applies to that. G, that hazardous goods or other goods whose distribution and consumption are regulated by law are sold or supplied in accordance with applicable regulations. H, that goods or materials, the production or use of which is likely to result in potentially harmful environmental effects, are labeled and supplied in accordance with applicable standards and regulations. I, that producers and suppliers are liable for defects in goods and for the violation of product standards and consumer safety standards which occasion loss or damage to consumers. And J, that violations of consumer safety standards by producers or suppliers are appropriately sanctioned and relevant criminal defenses to such violations are available to defendants. So if you violate consumer safety standards, we're supposed to come after you, and you're supposed to be able to get redress from the court if necessary.
So it essentially gives teeth to the department.
Yes.
Correct. And with this new legislation, it will be a big step up from the one that we are using right now. We'll be able to, we're trying to get it to be set up in a way where we will be able to issue citations right there on the spot for minor infractions. Like if we go into the supermarkets and you don't have your prices displayed, fines. You have expired goods on your shelf, we can fine you. If it's a situation where you are totally in breach of the act and you don't want to refund the customer their money for the item that they purchased, we can fine you for that right there. So it will give us much needed teeth, as you mentioned, because at the moment persons, sometimes they tend to disregard what it is we're trying to say to them and what we're trying to get across. So with this new legislation, they would have to actually pay attention or they'll be fined.
And it's important that you mentioned that it's a CARICOM bill, so it harmonizes across the Caribbean community, which I suppose would lend back to what you would have said earlier about the person from overseas who came here and was accustomed to a different standard overseas. Now we would have some of that being reduced with this bill being passed.
Yes.
As you know, persons purchase such things as like windows for their homes from other member states. So if it's a situation where somebody purchased some windows for their homes and when they get them here in St. Kitts, there's an issue with the windows. Since we are functioning under the same legislation, we will be able to contact the agency over there, wherever they purchase those windows, and they can investigate the case on that end for us and bring a resolution to the situation.
Good news for consumers. Now, Ms. Rollins, perhaps you can speak to this one, and Mr. Quilly can support as well too, in reference to Minister Douglas's reference that consumer protection is a part of the government's good governance agenda. How do you see that fitting in?
Well, part of the good governance agenda involves taking into account the voices of the most vulnerable in society, and it also involves being responsive to present and future needs of society. So consumer protection fits into this, for example, with the creation of the food basket or family shopping list. This list was created in an effort for the less fortunate to be able to create a basic meal. So the food items on this list were placed under government price control restrictions. Mr. Quilly can
also, in terms of the protection of the vulnerable person, everybody might not have access to the court system when they have an issue. So the Consumer Affairs Department would be there to assist those who cannot do that. Businesses tend to function in a certain manner sometimes because they know nobody will sue them, right? But when you have an agency there who is looking out for them, whether they are poor or rich, you know, you have to be on your A game. So that is how the department will be fitting into the good governance agenda. Protection of the vulnerable, so that they have a voice.
So, Mr. Quilly, what is the responsibility of businesses as it relates to consumer affairs?
Businesses, in their own right, are consumers as well. But when it comes to really serving the public, it will be incumbent on them to ensure that the services that they are providing are within the standards or the regulations of the laws of the Federation. You cannot be attempting to mislead the public. You cannot have one item, and you have two prices on the same item. You cannot have an item on the shelf and you don't have a price on it. You're misleading the public. Persons are supposed to be aware of what it is they're purchasing. Everything is supposed to be adequately labeled. You do not know if persons have an allergic reaction to certain ingredients. So it is important that all items on the shelves are labeled accordingly. Your premises are supposed to be safe for persons who are patronizing your establishment. Because at the end of the day, if anything happens to somebody going inside there, they can issue a lawsuit to you, and the lawsuit could very well close down your business. So.
And as you spoke about the prices of they're basically having to be standardized, what about a supermarket? Let's say a supermarket with multiple locations within the country. Like say one supermarket has one at one location and there's another one maybe in the rural area. Should the price of a product be the same in the urban area as opposed to in the rural area?
That would be difficult to maintain because the business might say, if they have a business in the Basti area and they have it in Sandy Point, they might say that the extra fee is for transportation to Sandy Point. But I know what you're getting at, you know. So, in terms of the pricing in the Basti area between companies that have the same name, that is a matter that would have to be addressed with the actual business. But if it is a price control item, once they stay within the markups that they are allowed, we cannot really step in. We can't step in there. So they are allowed to set the prices how they see best, but I cannot really explain the internal workings of certain organizations.
That's when we understand it completely. Talk to us a bit about COVID-19. We spoke of it earlier, Mr. Quilly, you mentioned it. Has COVID-19, as we continue to recover, has it impacted the work of the department?
I would say in the aspect that we get a lot more verbal attacks. And I say that because persons have the perception that we are letting the businesses do whatever they want.
So attack from consumers.
Correct. Yes. In terms of pricing. But persons should be aware that there are a lot of external factors that go into the end price of the products on the shelf. We have seen a drastic increase in container rates, and the businesses are there to make a profit. They're not just going to reduce the prices of their goods because you want it to be reduced. But what we would say to consumers in that aspect, if you would shop around and find the best price by another retailer, that's the best thing for you. You are not obligated to take it at a higher price from somewhere else. If you see it for a lesser price, try to take it from that place. Yeah, but if you wanted to look at it from a different aspect in terms of consumers and COVID-19, consumers, their purchasing choices would have been reduced a bit from COVID-19 because you would have seen the scarcity of products on the shelves, so their choice one of the rights of consumers is the right to choose. So if you have a limited choice, COVID-19 reduced their choice there.
Right. And so as we speak about international developments just now, Ms. Rollins, can you talk a bit about how international developments would affect pricing here in St. Kitts and Nevis?
Well, if the prices of the items are increasing overseas, consumers need to understand that the end price here will also be increased. So if suppliers here are usually buying, let's say, give me the name of a product that you like.
Corned beef.
Corned beef. If corned beef, the regular price before COVID, before the war in Russia, if the regular price was $5 and now it is now $8, they can't expect to go to the supermarket here in St. Kitts after they would have imported that product at an increased price and expect it to still be the same here. They are going to see the increase in that price in the end price here, because like Mr. Creeley says, the supermarkets, once they are within the markup range, and the markup range, when you talk about the markup range, that is 25% on the landed cost of frozen goods and 20% on dry goods. So as long as they are within the markup range, we cannot go and say, change your price. So consumers have to understand that part. Also, like Mr. Creeley said, the consumer has the right to choose. So if you go to a supermarket and the price of a good is out of your budget, you make the decision, do you want this or do you need it? Choose.
Whose responsibility is it then to educate the consumer about these things?
Well, I would say mine, the Department of Consumer Affairs, and that is why we are using 2023 as our year to raise awareness, raise more awareness, continue to raise awareness. So you'll see us on many more radio stations, you'll see us more active on Facebook, because we're trying to put as much information out there as possible, because at the end of the day, knowledge is power. So a well-informed consumer will make better decisions.
A perfect point to end it on. Mr. Rollins, Mr. Creeley, thank you very much for joining us. And we thank you, our viewers, for being with us for another edition of InFocus. I'm Ian Richards. Be sure to join us next week at the same time, at the same place, for another edition of InFocus.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the SKNIS Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio, and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.